Welcome to OLC 4.0. This is Term 1A, and we are on Class 17. We are doing Unit 2, Lesson 9, the readings and practice for it. We are in Week 5, and it is October 1st, 2025. This is Jillian Percy. Here are all of the ways to contact us. The studio number is 1-800-465-7144. The office number is 1-800-667-3703, extension 2211. My email is jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. My alternate email, jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. My Facebook is capital G, capital P, ERCY space capital W AHSA. If you send me a note on Facebook or like do a friend request, please send me a little message telling me what your student name is, like what you're registered as, and what course you're in, because I teach 4 different courses. And if there is a specific assignment you're asking questions about, let me know what it is ahead of time so I get a quick chance to look at it so I'm able to answer your questions. The classes are recorded and stored on YouTube. There are 2 different YouTube channels. There's my teacher one, which is also G Percy Wassa, and there's the school one, which is Wassa Distance Education YouTube channel. Either one of them will have 25, 26 OLC 40 playlist. Now, this is a newly revised course, so if you're doing some assignments and you're like, oh, wait, this doesn't match up to what I've got in front of me, that's no problem. Just check out last year's playlist, Term 2B, and it will have all the information that you need to complete the course. Okay, handing in assignments. When you hand in assignments, generally you will send them to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. Now, you can include me in my email as well, but the reason we do that is that way the secretary can log that you submitted the work and it goes into the data bank so everyone can see, yep, so-and-so submitted this. And if anybody needed to access it in another year, or if another teacher had to take over or something, everybody has access to it that needs it. If it only goes to my email, then I'm the only one that can access it, so that makes things tricky. Please make sure your full name, the course name, the assignment name and number are physically right on the page, not just in the email, because normally I don't see the email. It gets printed off and put in my mailbox. So if you forget to write on there, I'm having to kind of guess a little bit. Uh, put a rough draft and good draft label on if there is a rough draft and a good draft. There are a lot of different ways you can hand in an assignment. If you have a learning center, you can give it to the DEC and ask them to scan it and email it to me. You can fax it to me, 1-800-463-7852. Just give me a heads up that you're going to do that, and I will turn the fax machine on. You can scan it yourself using a scanner app on your phone and then send it to me, and I'll show you more about how to do that in a minute. Do not mail it to me right now. We are full on in a mail strike, right? You can share documents with me through Google Docs. Generally, when people do that, they use my Google Doc email. Remember to enable me to view or edit it. And if you can, make sure student work can view or edit it. Otherwise, they can't see it to print it off. If you are doing your work by hand, like handwriting it, a lot of people take a photograph of it and then send it to me through Facebook or email. Make sure your photograph is nice and clear. Only take a picture of one page at a time. Sometimes people will do like 2 pages in a notebook, but I find if you take a photo of 2 pages at once, it is far enough away that when I try to zoom in to see it more clearly, the writing just becomes pixelated and I can't really read it, okay? Make sure not to put it in the body of the email, but instead email it as an attachment. So take the picture, save it to your phone, and then email it to me instead, okay? Now, if you're going to be doing that a lot, rather than use your phone's photograph system, it's better to download a scanner app and scan it instead. It just has a much higher quality of a document and it's way easier for me to read. I use Adobe Scan. It's free. Adobe's a super reliable company and it's pretty easy to use. You install it, you open it up, And just like you're taking a photograph, you would hold it over your item. The difference is it will line up the corners, or there's like a little box. You can line up that with the edges if you want to. You take all the pictures of the pages of the assignments, hit continue. Now it will let you preview things. You can crop stuff, retake things if they're blurry, put them in order, hit save PDF when you're happy with it, give it a name, and then save it wherever you save things, Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, whatever you need. Then send me an email and attach it along. If you're going to be doing a lot of photographing, this is a way better way to do it than just taking a straight photographs because they just aren't as strong. Okay, this is our week 5 planner. Yesterday we were closed. Today is the first day of October 1st, and we are basically halfway through the course because class 17 is halfway for we have about 34 classes. And it is lesson 9, so we are almost finished unit 2. Okay. So the success criteria for lesson 9 is read, understand, locate information, make connections, and make inferences about a movie review. You can also brainstorm, draft, revise, and edit a movie review where you express your opinion and justify it with reasons and examples. Now, sometimes people will think it's strange that I've got opinions in the middle of our informational unit, but technically, opinions do count as a type of information, okay? It's not fiction, right? You're not making up characters or making up places. You're telling me your real opinion of some sort of real event. So it still counts as a special type of informational reading or writing, okay? Okay. So this type of writing, when you're giving an opinion, is often called persuasive writing. And it's when you're trying to persuade somebody or convince somebody to take a certain action or to hold a certain belief. It is considered a type of informational text because it involves real facts and real opinions rather than imaginary characters and events. One of the most common types of persuasive writing you may have seen would be book, movie, or game reviews. A lot of people check them out to see if other people think a certain movie or a new game is any good. People don't want to waste their money on a product that is not worth it. Okay. In any type of persuasive writing, the author clearly states their opinion on the topic or the product, and then they will provide reasons or arguments for why they hold that opinion. After that, they support those arguments with details or with examples. A typical piece of persuasive writing will often have at least 3 arguments supported by 3 examples. This type of writing might be one long paragraph, or it could be a page or even more pages. Sometimes the reasons and examples are just a sentence or two. At other times, each argument might get an entire paragraph of its own. It depends on the topic and the author's purpose. So other types of persuasive or opinion writing are things like advertising, letters sometimes will try and persuade you. Voting campaigns will often be trying to persuade you to do something. Protests will often be trying to persuade you to take a certain political belief or a certain political action, okay? Anything where they're trying to convince you to buy something or do something or believe something, it is considered a type of persuasive writing. Okay. So the structure of a basic persuasive text will look like this. There will be an opening sentence that states the opinion on the topic. Then there will be the first argument or reason, followed by supporting details or examples. And that could be a sentence or two, or it could be an entire paragraph. Then you'll have your second argument or reason, followed by supporting details or examples. And then you could have a third argument or reason, followed by some more supporting details or examples. Now, there could be more than 3 reasons, but usually 3 reasons are considered the minimum for academic style writing. Okay. If you're just giving your opinion to your friend about a game, it's completely different. But for school writing, this is a pretty typical thing. And then there will be a closing statement that restates your opinion and your overall conclusion. And again, that could be an entire paragraph. It just depends on how long a piece you're writing. So this is a sample of a movie review. You're going to read it and then answer the support questions that follow it. As you're reading this text, underline the main opinion and then underline and number the three main arguments the author makes for what makes the movie good. Put brackets around the examples, and the movie review continues on the next page. Now, one of the reasons why we're doing this is one of the strategies for understanding informational text is to underline or highlight the important information as you are reading it. I also find that if you're able to see the structure in the text that we read, it is so much easier to do the writing. And by the end of this lesson, may not be today, might be tomorrow, you are going to be writing a movie review as well. So that's kind of why I want to make sure you are able to recognize the different parts of it. So here's how it starts. The new movie, the new Marvel superhero movie, The Fantastic Four for First Steps, was an unexpected delight to watch. In the comic books, I found this superhero team somewhat boring and lackluster, but the production team produced a movie that is funny and compelling to watch. The plot of the villain Galactus who wants to destroy the world is a familiar one for comic book fans, but the twist is that this villain longs to step down and is looking for a successor to dump his cursed hunger on, which was a new twist that made me eager to see how the story ended. Okay, so the main opinion is basically that it was an unexpected delight to watch. Okay, so that was their opinion. And then their first reason was the plot. The plot has a twist. Basically, that would be their first reason. Okay. Now, moving on. The acting was phenomenal. Pedro Pascal portrays the team leader, Mr. Fantastic, as a gentle genius. Vanessa Kirby was a devoted but conflicted mom. Eben Moss-Bachrach played a more humorous, laid-back version of the Thing, and Joseph Quinn portrayed the Human Torch, not as an angry hothead, but as the lovable but impulsive younger brother with a desire to protect everyone. Of course, all Marvel movies bring their imaginary worlds to life through special effects that are mesmerizing but realistic. The Human Torch and the Thing are characters that need a level of constant special effects that could render them cheesy and ridiculous, but instead gives them a surprising air of realism. The intriguing plot, amazing characters, and special effects that enhance their world made for a movie that was worth watching. So their second reason is the acting is phenomenal. I don't have to underline every single bit of that sentence. It's quite a long sentence, just the main reason. Okay. And the other one would be the special effects. And again, I'm not doing the whole sentence. I'm just kind of getting the basic idea. All right. And then what else did it ask us to do? Did we have to do the closing? Okay. Brackets around the examples. Um, I guess this is kind of an example. It's kind of tricky because they're putting it all as one sentence. It's a little bit easier when it's two separate sentences. Here, all the examples are sort of the rest of the sentence, which again is a really long sentence. And the example here would be the stuff about the Human Torch and the Thing. Okay, so you can see there's not really a bunch of spare stuff. Generally, everything is either the reason or it's the example. And then at the very end, we've got the closing sentence. Okay, all right. So, support question number 6. What was the author's opinion of the movie? Basically, they liked it. What were the three main arguments or reasons? So first of all, they liked the plot twist. right? Because it was different than the comics. Number two, they thought that the acting was phenomenal. Number three, they thought the special effects were very realistic, especially with the team, right? Because I think it's actually pretty, the thing, if you don't know, he's kind of like a rock man, basically. He kind of looks a bit tricky. Um, and, and I think it's a tricky type of special effect to do. Okay, where am I? Okay, there we go. Um, did each of the three reasons get at least one example to support it? Reason one kind of more got an explanation rather than an example. Like they explained how it was different from the comic. Okay. Reason two about the acting, they did an example for each character. So four, I guess, four examples. And then reason three, um, I would call it two examples because it's the Thing and the Human Torch. So I would say there was two examples. So it isn't always just one reason, one example. Sometimes they use more examples. For this one, clearly the acting was a big thing for the reviewer, so they gave lots of examples of that particular part of it. Okay. Have you seen the movie? If you did, do you agree or disagree with the author's opinion of the movie? Now, obviously, um, there's no right or wrong to this. It's just a support question. I just want you to think about, did you think her reasons especially um, were accurate? Did you think the acting was good? Did you like the plot twist? Did you think the special effects were good? And then at the end, it talks about in this review, the author writes it was an unexpected delight to watch. So, what do you infer she was expecting when she went to watch the movie? So she says it was unexpected, an unexpected delight. So she didn't expect to enjoy it initially. Maybe she thought it was going to be exactly like the comic book, so she thought it would be boring, or maybe she thought it was going to not have good special effects, but she was surprised, right? She didn't think she was going to enjoy it. So when we talk about inferring, remember we're using our what we read about and what we know about to make a conclusion. It's not usually spelled right out. She didn't say, I didn't think I was going to like it, but I did. But you can infer that from the phrase unexpected delight. Okay? Okay, the next text we're going to read is a much longer opinion piece. For this text, the main reasons and the examples that support it will each form their own paragraph. As you are reading, think about how this longer piece echoes the shorter piece that we just read. It should still have the opinion stated clearly. It should still give at least three reasons for that opinion, and then it should support each reason with examples or details. The big difference for a longer text is that these pieces will often have an introductory paragraph and a closing paragraph. And if you're not used to seeing those before, you might find them a little bit confusing. Remember how when we studied the news story format, every news story started with a lead paragraph that summarized the main events or the five W's and the H. In an opinion essay, the first paragraph does something similar, only it states the opinion and then summarizes the main reasons very briefly without providing any details or examples. The way I always heard it explained when I was in school was tell them what you're going to be talking about, then talk about it, then remind them what you talked about. And it sounds funny because it ends up being a fair bit of repetition, but they're trying to get the basic format across because when you go on to college or university, you'll end up doing much longer pieces of writing. And then having that format makes more sense, right? If you're reading a 10-page report, it is actually easy to lose track of what's going on, and it is helpful to have an introducing paragraph. It's probably not as important when we're just doing these little one-pagers, but we're trying to teach you the format, basically. After the introduction, you're going to see 3 or more paragraphs, and then each paragraph will begin with the reason that it intends to argue about. Then that paragraph will give you examples, facts, details, or scenarios that attempt to convince you that their reason is a valid and persuasive one. Finally, the essay will end with a closing paragraph that often echoes the introductory paragraph. It will also restate the author's opinion, as well as restate the 3 or more reasons in a new way. Now, it doesn't have to, but it often does. Each paragraph will also have a blank line between them to make it easier to read. So this is one of those things that's especially important with computers and phones. Because a phone is so small, it can be really tricky to read a huge block of text. Those spaces between paragraphs sort of breaks up the chunks of text and makes it easier to read. For me, if as I'm marking stuff, having that little blank line where I can make a quick comment is also really important. So I do always look for that, okay? So, format of a 5-paragraph opinion essay. Visually, it will look like this illustration to the right. Each colored block in this illustration is a different paragraph. The top block and the bottom block are the same color because they form the buns of the overall essay. Remember how we talked before about the hamburger format for a paragraph? This is the same idea, only now it's for an entire essay. So you have your introductory paragraph, then your first reason with examples, then your second reason with examples, then your third reason with examples, and then your closing paragraph. And you can see I put a little white line between each paragraph, and that's to remind you to put a white line of space between each one of your paragraphs. Okay, reasons versus examples. One thing I sometimes find that students struggle with is understanding the difference between a reason and an example. So a reason will often be a general statement that you feel is true or may feel is not true depending on what you're arguing, okay? An example is going to be a specific type of scenario that illustrates that statement. So here is what I mean. If I said eating out is not healthy, that's my reason for something. But if I give an example, it's going to sound more like this. When I was at a restaurant yesterday, the menu said that the pasta dish with cheese was 1,250 calories, which is enough calories for your entire day. So my example is explaining why I think eating out isn't healthy. Um, Here we've got iPads cause harm to young children. That's my reason for maybe I'm trying to get iPods banned or iPods not used in schools or whatever. My examples, children under the age of 5 often spend too much time watching videos and not enough time learning how to talk. So that's my example of a reason why I think that iPods cause harm to young children. I might have a whole bunch of other examples, right? Maybe I could talk about the blue light or how it throws off people's sleep schedules or being exposed to porn young or all sorts of things, right? Another one, playing sports can increase students' ability to cooperate and work with others. That's my reason for something. I don't know what it is, right? We haven't listed it here, but that's my reason. My example is most team sports require players to work together to accomplish their goals, with each player doing a different but important task that is crucial to score points or win the game. So do you see how they sound a little bit different, right? Examples are often a little bit longer and they're more trying to describe a scene, whereas a reason is more just like a statement of opinion or what they believe is a fact, right? Someone else might think a different fact is true. Okay, so for the next key question, you are going to read and answer questions about an opinion piece. You are also going to write an opinion piece of your own. We started talking about the writing process in one of the other lessons, so we're going to begin using it in a more methodical way for this lesson. Remember that there are 5 writing process stages: pre-planning, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing. So we're going to start with stage 1, pre-planning. Before you start writing, it can really help to begin with brainstorming your ideas for what you want to write. You also need to think about the format of what you'll be writing. So, for example, if I wanted to write about a road trip through Canada, it would make a difference to my planning if I'm wanting to write a factual travel log that will help other travelers locate great vacation spots and events, or if I'm wanting to write a fictional story that is more focused on the character using the road trip to overcome obstacles along the way. I would plan those two things very differently. So the first thing to think about is, what are you trying to do? What is your format? What's your purpose? All those kinds of ideas first. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about graphic organizers versus lists. A lot of time I find that students think of pre-planning as just writing down like a quick little list of ideas. And because of that, they don't always find it very useful. Okay. But if instead you start to use a graphic organizer, these can serve as a type of visual framework that can help you to see the underlying structure of what you need to write about, and can help your planning be far more targeted and useful than a simple list. Now, depending on when you went to school, you may not have used graphic organizers very much in high school. They're very common these days, but they weren't as common back in the day, like when I went to school. So I'm going to include a few examples here so you can see what I mean by how their layout can sort of echo the structure of what you're trying to write. Now, I will say when I was younger and in high school, many, many thousands of years ago, um, we would have called this outlining. Okay. It's the same kind of idea, but the visual element of graphic organizers sometimes makes them far more accessible to people. Okay. So here's one example. This is an organizer for creating a timeline. So here you can see they've got a little timeline. They've got dots on the timeline and little squares where people can write different facts or events. They've got the title up here. So this probably wouldn't be the final product, but it'd be a great way to plan things out and already have the format sort of visualized for you. And it helps to get across the idea that when you're writing a timeline, you're going to be thinking about chronology, you're going to be thinking about sequencing. You're not writing a whole lot because you don't usually have a whole lot of space. Timelines, if they have too much writing, tend to be very crowded and difficult to read. So the way they visualized it helps you to visualize what you need to write. Here is a different type of graphic organizer. This is one that is set up for writing a short story. And you can see it's got that mountain format that is what we use as a plot graph. And they've set up the information so that you can kind of write it along the plot graph. So if you're a radio viewer, the where the top of the mountain, um, sorry, the bottom of the mountain, and as you're kind of walking up towards the top, they've got a little list of lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where you could list the different events that are happening that slowly get more and more exciting. And at the very top, they've got kind of like a flag stuck in the top of the mountain where you could put the climax or the most important part. And then on the other side of the mountain, as you're coming down, they have 3 or 4 lines where you could write the falling action or how things wrap up. And then there's another box for the absolute ending. Then there's some extra boxes at the bottom where they have some spots for you to make quick notes on your theme, any symbolism you want to use, foreshadowing, irony, that kind of a thing. So this could be used to help you understand a story you're reading. It can also be used to help you plan out a story that you want to write, right? Because reading and writing are the opposites of each other. So once you understand how to find the structure in something you read, it's much easier to plan the structure of what you want to write. All right. This is a graphic organizer for an informational paragraph. This is a lot like the one that we did with the hamburger format. You can see they kind of have blank lines just over the picture of a hamburger. This is one you would use for a younger grade, but it's the same idea, right? So hopefully looking at these different organizers, it helps you to show the type of planning I'm talking about. I'm not meaning write down a tiny little list of ideas. I'm talking about using an organizer that helps you to have a concrete visualization of the structure of different writing formats. And sometimes people don't realize that there is a structure for different writing formats. They just think people just sit down and write, but there's all sorts of structures. Just like if you were building a house, there is a typical structure for a house that is completely different than the kind of structure you would build for a school or that you would build for a tower, right? There's some automatic things that are different right away. So these types of graphic organizers can help writers understand what types of information are needed in their planning, what are the connections between the different types of information, and what order should they put the information in. So for this assignment, you're going to be writing a movie or a book review, and you're going to state your opinion, state several reasons for your opinions, and then give examples to support your reasons. It can help to start off with a graphic organizer that is set up with places to help you outline the specific types of information that you need. This type of outline does not need to be filled in using complete sentences because the purpose is to record and plan out your ideas rather than to write in perfect English. Now, having said that, the more detailed you are, the easier it is going to be to do your first rough draft. The vaguer you are, the harder it's going to be. So the important part isn't whether it's a sentence or not. The important part is, are you getting down all the important details that you want to remember and use? So on the next page, there's a graphic organizer that I want you to use to plan out your movie or book review. And if you want to, you can also read the movie review that follows to get a feel for how these types of reviews sound. Now, because we don't have a movie theater here in Sioux Lookout or on most of the reserves, you may not have read a lot of movie reviews. I don't know. Like, if you're watching something on TV, it's not as important. But if you're going to the movie in the city, it can be so expensive that a lot of times, like, I don't want to spend, 50 or $60 on tickets and another $50 on snacks for a movie that's terrible. So if you've never read a movie review, there are special spots where you can read some movie reviews. I'm going to show you at least one so that, oh, hang on a second. Something kind of got in my way there. Hang on a sec. Sorry, I don't know if you can see it, but there's like a little black bar here. So Siskel and Ebert write movie reviews, although at this point I think it's somebody else writing them because they're long dead. But now these are way longer than what we'll do. Okay, so please don't attempt to copy these. I'm not expecting yours to be as long as these at all. Okay, but hang on. Oh, this is a little bit different than what I saw recently. Okay. Why are they AI enhanced? All right, hang on. They've changed this item a little bit. Well, let me do it. Hang on a sec. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. See, they used to have little transcripts here, and you could just read the transcript. Obviously, you can watch the movie review as well, but I want you to get a feel for how they sound. Okay. The type of language they use, how they explain their ideas. There's also New York Times movie reviews. There'll be movie reviews in the Globe and Mail. So if you've never read a movie review at all, you might want to read a few of those before you try to write your own movie review, okay? Because they do have a certain feel to them that's a little bit different if you've never read one before. So support question number 7, fill in the graphic organizer below to begin to plan out your movie or your book review. You will need to have completed this section to be able to complete the key question for lesson 9, and I will be requesting to see this support question. Okay, so normally I don't ask to see the support questions, but in this case, I am going to. So please make sure you do it because I want to see how you planned it compared to what you ended up with. If you don't remember to hand it in, I am going to ask you to send it to me and I will not mark it until I see it. So please be conscientious about this. The other thing is sometimes people want to use a TV series, but I find it just doesn't work very well for this. It's really hard to explain a TV series in the same format because a TV series, every episode is kind of its own little storyline. So you're not really going to be able to explain the storyline in the way that I want you to do. Okay? So do not use a TV series, don't use a documentary. You're talking about a fictional movie here, okay? All right. So your graphic organizer would look like this. You tell me the movie or the book title, tell me your opinion, and then there's a spot here to list a reason, reason number 1, and then you give your examples right across from it. So hang on, right? Whatever example I give here, I then give, sorry, whatever reason I give here, I then give my examples here. And then over here, I would give a new reason, I'd explain it all, and then I would give some examples. And then finally, I would give a different reason and some different examples, okay? So this is a graphic organizer. Here is one that I filled out to kind of show you how it would look. Because I have done this one, you cannot choose to do Sound of Music. Now, I deliberately chose a movie that was really old so that people wouldn't be tempted, because I'm going to assume that people will want to do more modern movies that they've seen more recently, okay? So I'm sorry, Sound of Music is off your choices, okay? But Sound of Music, my opinion on it is I loved it. Reason number 1, the love triangle between the 3 main characters is fun to watch. Example, the contrast between the nun with only one dress versus the fashionable baroness with all sorts of expensive outfits. 2, Marie's love for the children versus the baroness's desire to avoid them. 3, Captain Von Trapp's admiration for baroness's sophistication and elegance versus his distaste for Marie's unworldliness and her awkwardness. Reason number 2, the historical setting of pre-World War II Austria adds real-life drama and depth to the romantic plot. Some examples would be things like the Nazi flag being put up in his house while he's away, and then when he comes home, he sees it and gets mad and tears it down. Or when they're performing live while the Nazis are watching them do their singing, and they're just waiting for the show to end to arrest them. And then at the very end, the family runs into the convent and they're escaping through the convent while the nuns are moving very slowly and unlocking the doors very slowly because they're trying to slow the Nazis down. This is a movie that's based on kind of a real life story. I'm sure not all the details are true, but because of that, knowing it's a real life story, it's kind of all the more dramatic, right? Reason number 3, the nun who is the main character has a lot of personality and depth that makes her personal growth realistic and enjoyable. So, for example, initially she's very unsure of herself, but she grows more determined to do right by the children, even if it means defying her boss, who is their father. She sees something good in all the children, even when they don't like her and they're being mean to her and they play a bunch of pranks on her. And she doesn't really want to fall in love, right? She would actually prefer the convent, and in fact, she tries to go back to the convent, but the nuns don't won't let her do that. So those are my reasons and examples. Now, this isn't the final product, right? This is just me planning out my ideas. So I'm expecting something like this when you hand in this key question, okay? Now, once you've got that, you're going to create the rough draft. So in this section, I want to talk about how to turn your rough notes into a good working rough draft. Let's say the first section of your graphic organizer looks like the one below. This is what is in your unit. The casting and acting were terrible. I'm not really explaining what movie it is, I'm just kind of talking generically. Too much age difference between the lead male and female. Lack of different facial expressions or any sense of deep emotion for the male lead. Other characters seem a bit two-dimensional and it feels cartoonish. Oh, something happened there. My computer just went dead. Oh, right. Awesome. Okay, so radio people, hopefully you didn't have any problems. And if you are um, out there in Zoom, hopefully you can join back in if you need to. When you are turning it into a paragraph, you always start the paragraph with your reason. So if you head back here, see how the reason comes first? That's why I did it that way. I want you to make sure that your reason is first. Now, you want to make it a good sentence. Here, I just made it very simple. You're going to want to expand on that and make it a more sophisticated sentence, basically. Okay? Then you want to follow it up with one or more examples. If you only have one example, you need to make sure that it's really long and detailed. If that example is brief, you're probably going to need several examples to fill out a paragraph because it's pretty typical for a paragraph to have at least 5 sentences. You don't want it to be too short. It's important to flesh out your sentences so they seem rich and interesting. You can use transition or introductory phrases at the beginning of some of your sentences to help guide your reader. Some sample transition, not sentences, but phrases are included below. So if you're adding examples, you could say things like, for example, another example is, a case in point is, one instance of this is, in addition. If you're trying to put things in a sequence, you might talk about first, second, or third. You might say things like after that, next, or finally, or lastly. Um, so when I'm talking about transition phrases, essentially they're the same thing as introductory phrases, which we've talked about before. Those are just a phrase that comes before the main part of the sentence. They are often adverbial, describing when, where, why, or how an action takes place. And we put a comma after the phrase before the main sentence starts. Okay? In this type of writing that we're doing, it's common for the introductory phrases to explain the sequence or chronology of events. It can help to explain the link or the connection between one sentence or the next one. Sometimes students try to do this through not using periods. They just use a series of commas because they're trying to show, hey, these sentences are connected, but that's considered grammatically correct. Now, I know that it's common in Messenger and Facebook, okay? But remember how we talked about at the beginning of this course, Messenger and Facebook are a more casual type of writing. For academic or school writing, we have to use more formal grammar, okay? So here's an example of using transition phrases versus commas to show connections. So this first one in the yellow, this is just using commas. I thought the plot of this movie was terrible. It was very cliched, which was boring because it was obvious what was going to happen next. There were a lot of times where the actions of the characters made no sense, as any rational adult would have made better choices. The acting was poor, the main characters sounded monotone and emotionless, like they were reading a script off a teleprompter. The male lead seemed expressionless with a stiff face. Now, I don't know if you can hear this, but the way I was trying to read it was, without the periods, there's no place to stop and take a breath. And if you're used to reading like you hear it as talking, it comes off sounding a bit rushed and crowded, and it doesn't quite give you time to think. Because normally, if you're reading and you're thinking at the same time, when you get to a period, that is this moment where you would stop and think about what you read. If you don't put any periods in there, you're not giving your reader a time to understand and process what they just read. So then over here in the green, I'm showing you the exact same information, except I'm using introductory phrases or transition phrases to try and help show you the connections between one sentence and the next. First, comma, I thought the plot of this movie was terrible. Period. For one thing, comma, It was very cliched, which was boring because it was obvious what was going to happen next. Period. For another thing, comma, there were a lot of times where the actions of the characters made no sense, comma, as any rational adult would have made better choices. Period. Second, comma, the acting was poor. Period. The main characters sounded monotone and emotionless, like they were reading a script off a teleprompter. Period. In addition, comma, the male lead seemed expressionless with a stiff face. So here are the transition phrases that I used. First, for one thing, for another thing. Second, in addition. Now, not every single sentence needs to have a transition phrase, but it really does help how clear and easy to understand your writing is when you do that. So I definitely look for students to use transition phrases. It's a key thing I start to look at this point in the course because I want you to begin using them. Okay. Closing sentences. After you have at least 4 to 5 sentences written and feel like you've proved your point with enough examples, you will need to write a closing sentence that echoes but does not copy word for word the main idea of your opening sentence. I have highlighted the closing sentence in the sample rough draft below. So here is a quick example. For this movie, I thought the casting and the acting were just terrible. First of all, there was too much of an age difference between the romantic lead male, Brent Stevens, and his female co-star, Amy LaRoe. The movie portrays them as being close in age, but the male actor must be almost 20 years older, which makes the romantic scenes feel creepy since he's old enough to be her dad. As well, I am not sure if this is an acting or a directing problem, but Brent's facial and emotional range seems to run from mildly amused to mildly attracted. He just doesn't seem to convey that this is a love story with a deep bond between the main characters. This seems to carry over to the other characters, who seem a bit flat or two-dimensional. Aside from some witty banter, there is no sense of what these characters are actually like. The movie ends up having an almost cartoon-like vibe due to how weakly everyone is portrayed. Overall, the actors just didn't seem to bring the story to life. So that's my conclusion. All right, writing a good closing or concluding sentence. The concluding sentence in an opinion paragraph has to restate your opinion. You can't give me a new reason, okay? It should also wrap up your kind of overall ideas in some way. Some typical conclusion type transitions or phrases are things like in conclusion, overall, to summarize, ultimately, all in all, therefore, consequently, finally, hence, as a result, as a whole, after all, due to these reasons, because of these issues, in my opinion. Okay. I'm sure you may think of some more. You're welcome to use whatever makes sense. Those are just kind of to get you started if you're having trouble thinking of some. Okay. So restating the opening sentence. Sometimes students try to stick a little bit too close to the opening sentence when they write their closing. Hang on. Sorry. Here are some sample examples. Okay. Opening is on the left-hand side. The closing is on the right-hand side. Okay. First, if they repeat the opening sentence almost word for word. Opening, I felt this movie was terrible. Closing, in conclusion, I felt this movie was terrible. That's a little too close, right? You want to make it a little more different. Or sometimes they'll just change one word into a synonym. I felt this movie was terrible. Closing. In conclusion, I felt this movie was horrible. That's so similar. It's not a great choice, right? You need to make it a little bit different. Okay. Hang on. Just there we go. Starting a whole new topic. I felt this movie was terrible. For another thing, it was a straight up copy of the Terminator movie. Okay, that's not a closing sentence. That's you about to give me a whole bunch of new reasons. Okay, so don't do that. Here are some examples of how you could try it instead. Okay, first of all, you could change the structure of the sentence completely. Opening, this movie was fantastic. Closing, all in all, I was impressed by this movie. So in the first one, movie is the subject. In the second one, movie is part of a prepositional phrase instead. So I've changed the structure completely. I could restate my main ideas briefly. The opening might have said, the movie was fantastic. My closing might say, the acting, the special effects, and the thrilling soundtrack combined to create an unforgettable experience. I could also try and make it personal or tie it back into the audience. This movie was fantastic. That's my opening. Closing. If you love movies that make you question your beliefs, you will love this movie as much as I did. So that's a way to kind of pull the audience into your writing. All right. It is 4:50, so I am going to be ending. We have one more class this week, and hopefully we will get finished lesson 9 tomorrow. If you have any questions, let me know and send me a little email. Take care and have a good evening.